Just want to welcome you all here and share with you the golden rules of leadership, which is going to be presented by Mike Donoghue, our managing partner of Helios Consulting. So welcome. So guys, I don't necessarily need to read this slide to you, but Mike Donoghue is the managing partner here at Helios Consulting, and he has over 35 years of international project operations and maintenance management experience. He has held management roles in various aspects of oil and gas production, and his areas of expertise lie in the identification of operational issues and the development of fit-for-purpose solutions which combine people, process, and equipment to achieve optimum outcomes from complex problems. So that's a consultancy type mouthful. When I think about Mike Donoghue and the person and the leader that he is, and the reason why I've chosen to do business with Mike, it's because of what you're about to see and hear today. Mike has been a very instrumental leader in my growth and my development and my ability to spread my wings and do the best work that I possibly can. And so it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce and present to you one of my very dear friends, my brother from another mother, Michael Donoghue. So we'll go ahead and we'll flip into that next slide and toss it over to Michael.
Okay, thank you, Kate. That was a lovely introduction. Really appreciate that. Thank you. So let's start off with, first and foremost, no leader ever becomes a leader just because he read the books. I've considered myself to be very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with amazing leaders. Each one shown me an aspect of leadership that I've tried to adopt, and for the most part, I would consider have developed to a level that I can use competently. Note that was me showing humility there, which is also a key part of leadership. At this point, I can't hear you, but I'm hoping that you've kind of like had a little bit of a chortle or a laugh, a guffaw even. A few people I'd like to recognize in terms of leadership, people that really demonstrated to me. Some of them came from Big Oil. The first two, Martin Morris and Stephen Willis, were both presidents of BP. Different regions, and they taught me some amazing things in how they demonstrated their leadership. Maybe they didn't state anything, but as somebody that was growing through the ranks and watching these people, how they actually approach things, they taught me an awful lot about how to drive culture and how to make it so that people want to follow you. That is a really important piece there. Greg Grabowski, another gentleman, he was a vice president in Canada. He became a very strong mentor for me. And he taught me that everything that you need to know, you need to encapsulate in a small phrase. And Kate will tell you, I am a walking dictionary lexicon of little phrases of how the wisdom sticks there. So Greg Grabowski, a great guy. John Hassan was a manager that I worked for in Canada. Again, awesome guy. He showed me what humility looked like and how to be a really strong leader and be vulnerable at the same time. The last one had nothing to do with my career. He was the coach, Arthur Evans. And Arthur is no longer with us, sadly. He passed away just a few weeks ago. But he taught me things about empathy and humility and listening and being strong and making sure everybody gets a fair crack, a fair go of the game. So I'd just like to say the gamut of attributes of leadership and what we're going to talk about here today. We won't get through all of them. However, the following, if these were part of your toolbox and you use them frequently, I believe you have the makings of a great team, a great company. So we'll talk about these 5 things. The first rule that I believe is most undoubtedly, if you can't get this one right, you're going to struggle. And to use Peter Drucker's phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you haven't got the right culture, it doesn't matter what games, what vision, what objectives you have. If you're halfway up the mountain and your team is still at base camp, then you have missed the opportunity to drive the right culture. And the second one is provide clarity. We put a diamond there because if you get this right and you talk about purpose and clarity of accountability and processes and these things, you'll see that the people know what they need to do when they need to do it, and that is critical. We'll talk a little more about that. The next one, we have a story to share with you on this one. It's in the details. Many senior people at the end of an incident or a failed company endeavor will sit there and say, if only I'd focused more on the details and asked the right questions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. This next one, show you care. If you can't show you care and that you actually care about the people that you are leading, why do they want to work with you? And I believe in Helios, we have got to a place where every single person shows up each day believing that they are part of something and they are looked after. And that is such an important part of leadership. The last one is make the hard yards. This is the one that pulls all those 4 rules together. And if you get it right and you show the commitment and make the hard yards, then you'll have the makings of a very strong team, company, organization. This is something that it's not just about oil and gas. It's not just about one company. It's any company that you're in. These are the transferable and non-negotiable rules that will grow and make you a strong leader. Okay. So let's move to the first one. Why good culture matters. So typically, good company culture potentially increases the revenue of any company by 4 times. It's 4 times more powerful in terms of generating what you need to do and how you achieve something than a company that doesn't focus on its culture. This was from a long-term study over 11 years, and it found that the best companies and the companies that encouraged all-round leadership initiatives and appreciated their employees and their customers, they grew 682% in revenue. During that same period, companies that didn't focus on company culture at best managed 166% in revenue. So that means a good company can actually, a good company culture can drive, if you did nothing else, you would get more results and a better return on investment just by focusing on your culture. But it's never that simple. So we'll talk about the next piece. Are you clear on your values? If you aren't, then you probably don't know what your culture actually is. It's probably moving wherever the flavor of the month is. You're looking at various ideas, you're reading books, and you're looking for that kind of opportunity to what kind of culture do we want? Culture comes from values. Kate has a really impressive slide that a lot of you have probably already seen, and it shows an iceberg. And all the things that we talk about above the line, above the sea level, those things, they're kind of like the tangibles, the things that you can see and you talk about. But the things that really make the difference are the things that's underneath the surface, the values, the conversations that people have. And so if you aren't talking about the values in your company, then what are you talking about? What kind of culture do you have? Our values are on the left-hand side there. We talk about, I'm going to talk at different ones here, and it's not in any particular order, but when Kate and I first started the company, we sat there and we said, what do we look for? What kind of values do we look for in the people that come to work with us? And we came up with the passion. You've really got to care about what you're talking about and what you do each day. You've got to really know that in depth, your subject matter. And then to use Kate's phrase, you've really got to know your shit. Okay. You've really got to be there. And then the other one, it's more, not so much a value, but it's an attribute. And it's, you have to be able to articulate and get your point across in a respectful way. So we talked about that. And then when Mike Gill came on board, we then started talking about what kind of values do we have? And we said, if we are going to represent clients and represent Helios to the best of what we can do and create the culture that we want, then we have to have honesty. We can't grow a company and not be honest with each other. Even if it's hard, even if it's brutal at times, as long as it's coming from a place of caring and a place of courage, commitment, and awareness and respect, very much about respect, then you have to have those conversations, and they have to be coached and or couched in the value system that you hold. So when we talk about this, an example of how we show courage, honesty, commitment, and awareness. One of our clients, I actually coach him on leadership and how he needs to both manage up and manage down. And we get into some very, very strong, honest conversations. And his favorite phrase is, I think I need to have a conversation with you, Mike. I'll bring my flak jacket. And so the sessions can be contentious. There's no doubt about that. However, they're always respectful, and our engagements are always positioned in a sense of we commit to support and care about the clients. To avoid a topic that might upset a client would not be honest to that client, and it would not show them the respect they deserve. So we've talked about those ones. The one that I haven't talked about here is integrity. And I actually think Warren Buffett, albeit he's a multi-millionaire, possibly a billionaire, he has some very wise words when it comes to integrity. Integrity is a foundational piece for all of the things that we've just talked about. And Warren Buffett, he has it nailed. When he's looking to add to his team, he says, we look for three things when we hire people. We look for intelligence, we look for initiative or energy, and we look for integrity. Now, when you hear that, you look at what we talk about, and we talk about, you've got to have intelligence, you've got to know, and you've got to have knowledge of what you talk about. You've got to have initiative or energy. To us, that's the passion. And then that final one, we look for integrity. We didn't articulate integrity to start off with, but we realized as we started to work with people that integrity is probably one of the most important things. And to actually use Warren Buffett's phrase, if you look for those three things, and if they don't have the last one, integrity, then you better hope that they are lazy and dumb, because you don't want a smart, industrious, devious person working for you. You want people who are passionate, knowledgeable, and have integrity. So you've got to look for that when you're building your team. So your company's values, they're personal to you and your leadership. You have to find ways to embed them in your organization and teams. So you need to have some kind of framework. And the framework that we talk about is on my next slide, which is about organizational justice. Organizational justice is effectively just treating people fairly, treating people how you would wish to be treated yourself. When you consider the culture of an organization, the vast majority of that organization is made up of employees. So their perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors are more likely going to influence the culture of the organization than any of your executive leadership dictates, directives, statements. What people talk about at the water cooler and how they go home and what they feel about your company when they do get home, these are the things that derive that culture. Organizational justice is a method or a set of constructs that help you to really understand what it is that you are trying to show in everything that you do. So it's made up of three elements. It's made up of distributive justice, it's made up of procedural justice, and it's made up of interactional justice. So distributive justice, it's how a member of a team is remunerated and the structure employed to do that. And performance management plays into this sort of thing. It's seen to be applied fairly and consistently. The more that's done, the stronger this aspect will be perceived by the workforce, and people will talk about the company in a way that is very respectful and promotive. It promotes. They will talk in a good way about your company. More importantly than the distributive justice, for me, is procedural justice. It's the approach that you take when you make decisions, when you set policy, when you write procedures, when you deliver process flows. It supports the concept of everybody is heard and given a voice. It's also employed consistently, and no one person is exempt the process, policies, and tools. Everybody is treated the same way. How many companies have you ever worked for where you felt that somebody didn't get the chance or was given more of a chance to do something than you were?
Well, and I think, Mike, when we start to talk about organizational justice and you're really talking about it in that frame of mind, the quote, one of the quotes that I use with our team very often is, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're
Absolutely.
allowing people to slip under the wire here, what else are you not focusing on and paying attention to as you're building the culture of your organization? And if you've got a colander in terms of your culture, you've got holes in everything because you're not allowing people to believe in what you do because of those lack of consistencies.
That's right. I was once told, Kate, when your guys, when the team goes home on an evening, who do you think they talk about at the dinner table? The things that have happened at work that day, and how somebody got more of a break than you did, or somebody went and has not actually pulled the load that they were meant to be doing, and they still get a reward, a performance bonus, all of these things. So how you apply procedural justice is critical to having a workforce that is engaged. And we'll talk a little bit more. There's one more thing I want to talk about, is interactional justice. So if we talk about treating people fairly and making decisions and that benefit the company, but everybody is held to that level, then interactional justice speaks to treating people with dignity and respect and sensitivity. How many companies, I'll ask that question again, how many companies have made a decision, and when it comes to the actual execution of this, that the company has not considered the sensitivity and the impact that decision is going to make on the workforce, whether it be in terms of laying people off, whether it's a change in direction, even if it's down to technologies being applied, and now somebody that was doing a really good manual job just can't get their heads around the technology piece, and they have to be let go. That's a brutal fact of the environment we work in. That disruptors are changing the landscape all the time, and so you have to treat people with dignity and respect. You've got to make sure that the decisions have to be made, but they have to be made, and people are supported through those decisions by explaining it to them and helping them see what's needed and why this is happening. You cannot just throw a decision out there and then drive a conclusion, because again, what you'll find is people will be staying down behind, waiting to see what the real factors are. They don't understand what's happening. And so what they do is they don't follow you as a leader, and they don't trust you as a leader because you don't care about them. So before we move on, there's another aspect. Those three elements of distributive, procedural, and interactional justice that forms organizational justice, there's a piece here that is known as OCB, organizational citizenship behavior. To put it in a very simple way, this is discretionary behavior that somebody brings to the work each day. It's the positive attitude. It's the things that you can't reward somebody for, because rewarding them for that piece and other people for not having it, when each one does their work to the same level, but one does it in a much happier, better way and impacts and brings the team along with them. End of the year, you may be able to do that, but you can't treat people differently to that bit just because somebody's more positive. But if you get OCB and get that discretionary behavior, and you'll end up with, if you can get more people in your team to work in that way and demonstrate that discretionary behavior based on the organizational justice, then you will have a very powerful framework and a very powerful team. Okay. Okay, so I'd like to tell you just a little story here of when I was a manager out in a field in north of Calgary. It was middle of winter. We had around about 3 to 4 feet of snow, and there was a piece of maintenance that had to be carried out. And so the mechanic, he got in his truck and went out to this field where there was a compressor station. He didn't wait for the field or the track to get plowed. He thought that with his 3,500 truck, he could just move that snow. So when they actually ultimately rode up on top of a bank of snow and he was spinning his wheels, he was going nowhere. He got on the radio and told the instrument tech that was going out to work with him what had happened. So the instrument tech figured he could drive down the track of the 3,500 truck in his 1,500 truck, and before you knew it, around about 15, 20 yards from the mechanic's truck, he actually got stuck as well. So being smart people, both of them technicians and very intelligent people, they contacted the operator and said, we're stuck. Can you help us? So he was really smart. He didn't actually drive down the lane. He didn't get stuck. But what he did was he got a tow rope out, and then he went to attach it to the instrument tech's hitch at the back, only to find out there was no hitch. There's no clevis. All he had was the safety lugs. And so he attached the tow hook to the safety lug and then attached it to the front of his truck and started to pull the instrument truck out of the snowbank that he'd got into. What actually happened was the safety lug, the metal lugs at the back where the hitch either side, where your safety chains go, they actually sheared, and the nylon tow rope flew back towards the operator's truck. Thankfully, it didn't hit the windscreen and didn't go through and hurt the operator, but it did wreck the radiator on the truck. So now we've got 3 trucks out of commission, and that's when they figured they should call the boss. And so I got the call. I went out to look at it. I didn't go down the lane. I walked down that lane, didn't drive. I wasn't going to get the 4th truck stuck. And so I started asking questions. And then, as you always have to do in these positions of leadership, you have to report upwards as soon as you have sufficient facts to be able to tell your manager what happened. I did so. And my manager, he went to a concept that we'd recently introduced called just culture model. And the first question in the just culture model was the person's behavior as intended? And then there'll be another one and another question and another question. I'm going to show you something similar in a second. But his first question was, who are we going to get rid of? Who needs to be fired? And I said, well, before we can do that, we first of all need to know, did we set these people up for success? Did we give them the tools and all the things? Did we give them policies and procedures that were critical to that particular job that they were asked to do? And so when we did the full investigation, it actually turned out that no, the policy was not very clear. It wasn't very workable. And there was 3 people there in that particular field who had all stood there and said, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And so the next question would be, would that person or anybody else in the company have done the same thing? Well, yep, they did the same thing. So if you really follow the just culture model, it was never intended to improve safety or productivity or anything. It was intended for me to drive people out of the organization without a fair way of being treated. Okay, so that question that I asked, was the policy, procedure, standard, rule available, clear, understandable, and workable? 2 of the guys had never heard the towing policy existed. The 3rd one did. When we looked at it, it wasn't workable. 3 of them were stood there working out how to get themselves out of this problem. And so they were all qualified. These were all experienced operators and mechanics and instrument technicians that had worked in that region for many, many years. So they'd done that. I think my point is, before you can even think about looking at how do you discipline somebody, you have to take a really good, strong look at your company's policies and procedures and make sure that you've trained people and that the policies and procedures where they are critical to the safety and functioning of that organization, that they are there and fully communicated with everybody involved. Okay. We good with that? Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a bit. And the reason why we now have provided clarity is that story. It follows through. Okay. It speaks to procedural justice and how ensuring policies, procedures, and processes are clear and workable and applied equitably across the organization. Allowing one person not to follow that policy or process and making everybody else do that creates that sense of organizational injustice, which destroys the organizational citizenship behavior that exists there. Okay, so let's talk about this. Purpose. It's not just what we do, it's not just how we do it, but more importantly, it's why we do it. If I was to ask Kate, what is our purpose? When we talk about that sense of why do we do things, I'm going to say it for her, unless you want to chime in, but it's, we put purpose before profit.
Always.
We would much rather work with a company and help them get to a better place in terms of leadership, change management, any of the practices that we offer. We would much rather do that than make a massive profit on something. It's not there. So having that purpose, and when you have that kind of level of purpose of what it is that you do and why you do it, 10% employees are less likely to leave for a 10% increase in pay if they feel that there is value in what they are doing and what they are offering to society as a whole. Employees who believe their organization has a broader goal, 27% more likely to stay where they are. So having a purpose, and it's not your vision, it's having a purpose. It's different to your vision. The vision is where you want to be in 5 to 10 years. Your purpose is why you come to work each day and what you do as a consequence of that, and how strong your beliefs are and your values are held to because of that purpose. Okay, let's talk about policies, procedures, and processes. So my first one, good fences make good neighbors. So that, I'd love to say that it was me, but no, that was Robert Frost. It applies to both individual and teams, and teams that have clear accountabilities and know what the boundaries of each team's roles and responsibilities are, they will fit better together, and they can demonstrate OCB, that organizational citizenship behavior. The next one, standardization, is great if it fits my standard. How many times have you come to work and disagreed with a policy or procedure and thought, I can do a better job? And I'll be honest with you, we could roll a procedure out and we didn't communicate it out to the team properly. And 3 weeks later, they'd changed that procedure. They'd done it the way that they felt that it should be done. And quite honestly, that's another important piece. When you're developing procedures and policies, the people who work for you know how to do something much better than you do. So you should be asking them. And if you do that, what you'll end up doing is you'll get their input, and they are more likely to take that policy and procedure and work it. And if there is a problem with it, they'll come and tell you about it rather than they'll change it or they'll just stop using it. So a key thing when we talk about this as well, and it comes to this last piece on this one, your risk tolerance sets the rigor. You can't have every detail of an operation written down. There is no way that you can capture every single thing in your organization. But what you should be doing is looking at the risks of what your organization can encounter, whether it be safety, whether it be reputation, whether it be financial wealth, any of these things. You can't write everything down, but you can know where the risks are and make sure that the critical procedures are captured, written down, people are trained on them, and then made sure that everybody is compliant with that. You've got to also allow a certain amount of latitude. You've got to trust to the training of your people. You've got to trust to their competence, experience, and allow them that leadership, but only where to do so would not threaten the company's survival. Okay, there are so many different places, different stories of safety incidents where people chose not to follow process and procedure, weren't held accountable, all of these things that we talk about, and that actually destroyed the wealth of the company. The other piece that I'd like to talk about here is Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. This drives to accountability. This is the piece that I really want to get across here when you provide clarity around the accountability. But you can't just demand accountability. It's like OCB. Accountability comes from within. It's your own value system and whether you believe that you are being given the latitude, the training, all of the things to be successful, and then you make that decision, discretionary input, to step forward and be the leader in that organization. But in order to do that, you've got to have trust. That's the first thing that Lencioni will tell you. If you don't have trust, then it's the foundational piece. The rest of it will not be built upon. Now, how do you get trust? You get trust by showing vulnerability. by asking people, how do you do these things? You ask them, what would you do? Where could we do better? And you engage and you build a relationship with that person, and that person gets to see that you are not this know-all, omnipresent being that can destroy their careers and this sort of thing. You have to show that you are no different than them, and you all have come to this place to do a piece of work to deliver an objective that is much stronger than individually. You working as a team and trusting each other will achieve that. Once you've got that, you would then be able to develop and have productive conflict. Productive conflict. It's about dealing with issues, not individuals. And boy, can we have productive conflict in our company. It's amazing to see Tianis, Mike, myself, Kate, when we're having discussions on any of our key deliverables at our business, we go at it hammer and tongue. We are constantly, we will not just back down for the sake of it. We will iron out issues, but we respect each other and we trust each other that we've got the good, we've got the welfare of each other in our first and foremost position when we talk to each other about that. So when you get to that place where you can have that level of productive conflict and you come out of a meeting and you talk to each other and you are clear on what our next set of objectives are, then you can get commitment. And when you are clear on what the commitment is and what it needs to be, you can then get to that level of accountability. And that's the piece that only you can give accountability. It can't be demanded from you. It's something that only you can do. Because I talked to a client just yesterday, and he said, his incident management system, there's questions that should have been asked, but the team isn't asking the question that should be asked. And that comes to that thirst for knowledge and asking the questions and being accountable and saying, I can't allow this to happen in this organization. I will step forward and make the difference. That's accountability. And if you can get to that level, results will come. Culture, process and procedures, clarity of purpose, clarity of all of the things we just talked about, and then having a team that hold themselves accountable is the most powerful thing that you can have.
Well, and I think about even some of the conflict that we've had and how extensive it has been, right? We had, much to how many people have experienced tumultuous kind of conditions in the past year and a half. And we had people who were working with us, and we've been through it. I mean, we're not even 5 years old yet, but we've had people who have come and gone who are really great people, but just not a really great fit for our organization. And in one of those instances, I remember we as a leadership team made a decision, and you guys went to go and have a meeting, the three male partners, off you go to go and have that discussion while I was with a client. And I remember the phone call afterwards where you guys came back, and our decision was we were going to terminate our relationship with an individual. And you guys came back and told me that this individual was going to continue to work for us on a pro bono kind of dollar basis based off of what she landed and so on and so forth. And I said to you guys, that is not what we agreed to. And you had your reasons and how the discussion went, and I wasn't there. I wasn't part of that discussion. And you guys really walked toward the roar on that one. And so when you guys came back and told me that, was I mad? Absolutely I was. We had deviated from what the original plan was. And my response to you was very simple. I disagree. I disagree. I think you've made a poor choice. I think it's the wrong decision. I don't think that this is going to work out. However, this is where we see that consensus. And consensus is, that 80-20. 100% of the time, my decisions are the right ones, but, some of the time you guys are right too. And so in that time frame, you guys went, you had that conversation. We came back, we were doing a debrief, and I said, I really disagree. You guys made a bad decision. I don't like it. I think it's the wrong one. And that was upsetting to you guys. And I know it was, and that's why I said it. You needed to know how I felt. But then that being said, my next phrase out of my mouth was, I may disagree with what you've said, but when we walk out of this room, off this phone call, not one person on our team will know that I disagreed with you. because I will stand behind your decision
Yep.
and I will support you and we will move through this and we will do whatever we need to do to make sure that this stays on the rails. I mean, now the entire world knows that I didn't agree with you, but that's okay. It was a learnable, teachable moment, right? But again, that didn't fracture my relationships with you. I didn't think less of you. I was just annoyed more than anything at the fact that our decision had changed, and that's okay.
And if I can just add to what you just talked about there, Kate, that what you just described, how we came back, that was procedural justice. That was that organizational justice, and that one element there that you were considered. We brought the subject back to you. We told you why. We didn't just say the decision's made, that's it, get over it. We talked it through and we followed our policies and our belief in procedural justice and interactional justice, because we valued your input as much as ultimately the decision had to be made, and we went down one path that you didn't agree with. We did actually give you that opportunity to voice your displeasure, and it actually, to me, it showed the strength of the team, and I think the team grew that day as well. Okay, thank you for that, Kate. Let's move to the next slide. So when I mentioned what interests my boss fascinates me, Kate has this emotional response.
Oh, you guys, my eyes roll so far back in my head, I look at my own ass. This one, this phrase is one that I understand it, but boy, oh boy.
So the reason why I have this one, I learned this over many years, and some of the biggest events that's ever happened, and that in the companies I've worked for, have been because, as it says there was a vague sense of unease missing. If we could talk about Texas City, an incident in 2005, it was March the 23rd, 15 people were killed and 180 people were injured. The report that came out afterwards, the Baker report, there was one section that really resonated with myself, and it was reflections from the chief executive for refining and marketing in BP. This is what he said was, my first reaction was, how could the worker have been so stupid that caused this incident? Then I realized that he had done what he did in the presence of several workmates. And I thought, how could they have let him do this? Later that day, I began to wonder about the role of the local manager. And ultimately, I found myself asking, why did I let this happen? That is such a powerful thing. And what it talks to for me is, where was the relationship and where was the inquiry that was going on for that particular person? You could argue span of control, you could argue a lot of things, but where was the really important things? Where was that marketing and refining executive? What important tells were there? They were under financial pressure. The cost of operating and running and performing turnarounds was proving to be more than the company could actually sustain the value that was coming out of the Texas City. But when you've got these kind of important tells, irrespective of the level of leadership that you're at, you should be asking. You should be asking people, where can things go wrong? And that's not just about safety. That's about the productivity. That's about what's happening externally in the external environment that we operate and work in. So all of these things, and one of the things I learned very much is you never know all the things that you should. So keep asking the questions of your team. Where could things go wrong? And if they can't answer this, then go find someone who can. That is really important. A good dose of humility and recognizing. It's funny how often the problem is you. I was mentored by a great leader. At least I felt he was a great leader. He told me, if a member of your team is not delivering what you need, it's most likely your fault. You are not asking the right questions. You aren't clear on the details. You aren't checking the capability, the competence, the space and time needed to achieve the objective. And you aren't providing interim guidance they need to be successful. And that's what I saw from that chief executive. When he couldn't answer the question of what was my role in this, he wasn't closely engaged with that particular situation to the point where he could catch the important tells. Short interval controls. It's really important. Whenever you ask somebody to do something, it goes back to that piece of the ask to tell ratio. Ask people, how are we going to do this? And if they can't tell you how they're going to do this, help them plan it out. But more importantly, make sure that at some point before the end date for the deliverable is due, you've set up various check-in points. I call it short interval control. And it's amazing how many people don't do this. They give somebody an objective and then they just leave that person. And then when it gets to a week before and there's still 10 weeks work to be done, they then start to panic and have to let people down, which destroys credibility. Your authenticity is lost as a leader. So you need to be sure when you're talking about short interval control, ask about the why and the how, not just the what that needs to be done. Okay. A word of caution as well, because when you're doing this, when you check in with people, you're looking to find out what obstacles that they're encountering. And your job is not to take every obstacle that's there. You need to find out whether that person can actually remove the obstacle themselves with a little bit of help from somebody else or what needs to happen there. But it's not about you taking that work on. The word of caution that I have here is who owns the monkey? So the Harvard Business Review has a document that's called How to Feed and Nurture Your Monkeys. And it basically comes down to this. Each day that you meet with members of your team, if you ask them, how's it going? And then they say, well, I've got this problem. And then you take that problem off them and you don't help them solve the problem. You just take the problem. You've now added a problem to your back, a monkey on your back. And if you go through the day doing this, then when do you find the time to take the problems and the work that you have to deliver? Do you hand that up to your boss? But at some point, if you're a leader and there is nobody above you to solve this problem, where do those ones go? And you're going to end up in a place that you are not in a healthy, either physically or mentally able to support these people. So you've got to be very clear when we talk about who owns the monkey, and not taking obstacles off people just because you feel that you can solve that problem and it makes you popular with them. Growing people is about helping them solve the problems, not taking their problems from them. Okay? So the next piece, Theodore Roosevelt, he actually said the following, to be precise: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It supports the ask to tell ratio on the previous slide. How many managers, how many bosses, leaders have you experienced where it's a one-sided conversation? You go to them and you want to have a conversation to tell them what you've done, and what they actually do is they tell you what they want you to know and what it should be, but they don't listen to what you have to say. So they're not bothered about, they're not showing any interest in you. What they're doing is showing you how smart they are, and that's not showing people that you care. Okay. So I mentioned it in the previous section. Look after yourself. Focus on yourself. Look after your physical health and your mental health. And remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you can't give your team what they need, if you don't have any yourself to give. Okay, I'll say that again. You can't give your team what they need if you don't have any yourself. So when you do that, it's very hard when you're in certain positions to find the time, but you have to step away and you've got to recuperate. I learned that lesson. I got to a point after 3.5 years of grind, and it got to the point where I couldn't stay focused on anything. I was doing lots of different things. And what happened was I stepped away and I actually took a week of examining what I was doing and where I needed to go. And what I found out was there are things that I was holding to myself that the team could help me with. So it's not always just about you being that ultimate leader and having an answer for everything. Show vulnerability and show that you care and for yourself as much as anybody else, because nobody wants a leader that can't be present. And that's an important thing, investing time and effort in your people and being present. But if you're not healthy and you're not mentally aware, you can't demonstrate this.
Well, and now we've worked together so long that I can tell when he's close to burnout. His little cheeks get rosy, and I always say to him, "You're rosy. What's going on?"
So an example of me showing that you care. Um, I was the maintenance manager for a startup, a big project, $3-4 billion project. And irrespective of how busy my day was, I would take 30 minutes every morning as soon as I knew the team would come in, and I'd give them 15 minutes to get in, get settled. It wasn't a question of walking the floor to catch them out, but walking the floor and meeting with each one and asking, how's it going? What was last night like? How, anything that's going on, you want to share? And it was never me telling them anything. It was me open inquiry, asking those questions to show that I was interested in who they are. An example of where this actually is probably the one that's stuck with me is that particular period of time. One of the guys, I got to know him fairly well. And it was that kind of thing. He would come to me and he would tell me his ideas, and we had a relationship. It was really strong professional relationship. And I saw him one morning. It was a Monday morning after a long week. Sorry, after a weekend. I think he'd left on the Thursday, come back on the Sunday night, and he was at work, and he just didn't look like he was in the game. And so I asked him, how's it going? Do you want to have a chat? And he said, actually, yeah, I do. I need to share with you some stuff. So it turns out that he'd flown from where he lived back to Calgary to do work because he was so committed to the job. But on the day that he left on Sunday, his wife had, well, it can't have been that Sunday. It must have been the Friday, but they'd got the bad news that his wife had an illness that was heading towards terminal. And he was in such a state, but he'd shown up because he felt that that's what was expected of him. Me personally, I asked him, where do you want to be? And he said, well, I don't want to be here, but I feel I have to be. And I said, we'll fly you back home. We'll get you out of here. We'll get you home. Consequently, he actually, we're still friends. And this is many years later. But that's the kind of thing that you show that you care and that you're a human. So I want to talk to these last two pieces here. Kate, you use this phrase an awful lot, and it's we're here for a good time. Nobody shows up to work feeling that it's a crap job, but something, I just don't want to leave and go somewhere where it could be better. Nobody's like that. And when I hear you say we're here for a good time, what I hear is treat every single person that shows up to work with you. And it's become even more apparent with the team that we have in Helios. You are all volunteers. Yes, we get paid. Yes, there are things that we do and it's fun, but there is no kind of beating down, none of that kind of behavior that you have to turn up and you have to be here on time. We have the conflict, we have the trust. We come back to that piece about accountability, and we trust each other. And because we have all of these things, and I'm hoping you're seeing it's kind of like a ball that's starting to kind of like become very much. Leadership is not do this, do this, do this. It's do all of these things, and then you'll start to see a return on the investment of what you do. And it's very important that you treat people as volunteers. They don't have to come to work. They can go somewhere else to work. I'm not saying that people can not work, right? And sometimes this may be the only job in town, but should that be the condition of how you treat people, that they can't go anywhere else? Can't stress that enough. This last piece, focus on your attributes and those that build the team. These are the things that make an authentic leader: empathy, humility, compassion, transparency, and collaboration. Everybody shares the results. Everybody knows what's going on. We put a lot of time and effort into making sure every member of the team knows what's going on in our sales, in our projects, all of our client engagements. Where it's right to do, we share everything, and we're transparent and open about these things. But again, empathy, humility, and compassion, These are the things that modern leaders have now. And if you're still in the place of, conquer, divide, intimidate, alpha male, those things are long dead, and you really need to read some and experience some modern thinking on this sort of thing. Okay. So Francois Pienaar, to those of you who know who he is, great. And if you don't, I'll just give you a little bit of background. Francois Pienaar was the captain of the South African rugby team that won the World Cup in 1995. Tiennis is exceptionally proud of this because he's Afrikaans. And I've sat and watched a game of rugby where England lost to South Africa while Tiennis crowed about that particular victory. It was the last World Cup that they won. Francois, when he retired from rugby, he was a commentator in England, and he would always make the statement is you have to make the hard yards. It looks great when you see the facts, the guys, the pretty boys, they're all running around passing the ball and scoring tries, and the crowd's going wild. But the guys in the forward pack, they're the ones that have to make the hard yards. They're the ones that do all of the grunt work and all the other things. Leadership is making the hard yards. That's why I share that one. So, walk to the raw, but don't run. Ultimately, you as a leader are entrusted with the performance of a team. This means if you avoid the raw, you are failing as a leader. Anything, when we talk about treating people equitably, fairly, when we talk about organizational justice, you are entrusted by that organization to ensure that people are all treated the same way and held to account. Accountability is one thing, but held to account is a different concept altogether. You've got to be willing to hold to your values. Sometimes it's easy to make a decision that doesn't always show that you are holding to your values, but if you really want to deliver authenticity and credibility as a leader, you have to stick to those values. And you have to do it and take the lumps. Sometimes it's not easy. And over the last 4 years we're 4 years in as a company, and we have had to take some lumps, but we've done it and we've held to the values and we respect each other as a consequence. I wouldn't want to be going through anything like COVID with a team other than the team that we have together today. Thank you, guys. So sometimes with the best will in the world, again, hold to those values. The best will in the world, we have to let talented people go. To Warren Buffett's statement, if you're going to get somebody that is devious, you want to make sure that they're lazy and dumb. I'm not saying that we've gotten rid of people who are lazy and dumb, but their values just didn't fit with ours. And so those of you who know who I am, you'll know that loyalty to my team and friends is exceptionally high on my compass. So when a decision to let somebody go is made, I take it very hard, but I still have to make that decision and take it. And finally, always check your ego. Personally, I've had to look at what I am and what I'm not good at, and seek support and direction. That comes back to that piece again about Lencioni's. If you don't show vulnerability and the willingness to say, I need some help here, and this is what I can't do, then you're not going to have that credibility and authenticity as a leader, and you won't drive people and be able to have the productive conflict and these things. You have to make tough calls and hard yards, even when you think that it's you that needs to talk. Sometimes, and as I said, there are plenty of times over the year where I'll sit back on a weekend and I'll look at where we're performing well and where we could do better. And I'll ask myself the question, what is it that I'm making the difference? Am I holding the team back by not working and being as collaborative as I could be? Am I not giving them an opportunity to step forward and be a leader themselves?
So give us a follow on social media if you haven't already, folks. We are on LinkedIn. That's our primary platform where we publish a lot of information and share a lot of our insights. And of course, where you heard about us in this particular webinar. We do have a website. You can hit us up over at heliosconsulting.ca, and you can check out what we have to offer there. We do have a whole series of different blog posts depending on the different practice areas. And so we'd encourage you to go and have a look at those. And before we close out today, what I'd like to do is just share with you guys that we've launched our Summer of Support charitable giving campaign as of yesterday. And so Helios believes that, unfortunately, need doesn't take a summer vacation. And so we've partnered once again with the Calgary Food Bank. And because we've now expanded our consultancy into the Yukon, we also have an organization that we're working with up in the Yukon called FASI, which is Fetal Alcohol Syndrome Society Yukon. And so we'd encourage you to go and have a look at the donation pages and check out who these folks are and what they do for the communities, and help us create a summer of support for these two organizations who serve a very vital role in our communities. So thank you, Michael. That was fantastic.
Thank you, everybody. I truly appreciate the time that you've given here. Thank you.
Have a fantastic day.